What's going on, everybody? This is Jay and you're watching Wil'sVGAddiction. Mr. Dude 206 just put out a video yesterday, I believe, in which he talked about the games that give him the most nostalgic feelings. I believe he was tagged by Nate from the Thrift Dwellers. He actually tagged me to do a video response where I basically talk about the games in my collection that give me the biggest feelings of warm and fuzzy. Definitely not the most valuable, price-wise anyway, but the ones that are most valuable to my heart. I thought this was a really good idea, especially after watching his video and listening to him talk about all the things that were going on in his life, and hearing him talk about the 80s and 90s technology and how everything in the 90s needed batteries, remotes, CD players with the skip protection. Does anyone remember that? Walkman and all that good stuff. So it definitely brought a smile to my face watching that, and I definitely wanted to get in on that and do something. It's really hard to narrow down just a few games in my collection that give me a great sense of nostalgia, since there are so many to choose from. Initially I had about 10, and I figured the best way for me to really narrow it down to the ones that are really the most nostalgic to me is to think about it like this. If I had only a few wishes to go back in time and play these games for the first time and experience them the way that I initially experienced them, and feel all the good things that I was feeling at that time, which games would I choose? So that made it significantly easier, and I picked out 5 games that I want to talk about. Now, the first game that I'm going to start off with is kind of cheating because I'm going to use 2 games. It's NBA Live 96 for the Sega Genesis and NBA Live 96 for the Sony PlayStation. Now, the reason that this is so nostalgic to me is because I was a huge NBA fan back in the day, basketball fan in general, but NBA Live 95 was probably, at the time, the greatest basketball game that I had ever played. It was the most simulation, well, how do I say this? It was the best simulation game that was available at that time. Now, it had its flaws, sure, but it was still a great game. And when NBA Live 96 came out, like, they fixed so much stuff, and it was the first one, I think it was the first one that had a full season and complete, very complete stat tracking, and the gameplay was just so much better than NBA Live 95. You know, which did a lot of the same things, but the gameplay just wasn't as good. This was such an amazing game. Now, I remember renting this multiple times when I could get it, because it was always rented out by somebody. So when I got this, I used to play this for hours on end. I remember coming home from school, and that's all I would do. I made a cassette mixtape with the Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Scarface, Bone Thugs, a lot of really great rap music, and I would put it on after school and I would just zone out. And I remember having just tons and tons of fun. I don't remember when I actually bought this game. It wasn't too long after, I don't think, but I did eventually get a chance to buy it. And then when the Sony PlayStation came out, I didn't even have a PlayStation yet, but I had bought 2 games. I saved up my allowance for many months in order to get them. I got NBA Shootout, which was actually pretty good. Graphically, it was a lot better than Live 96, but Live 96 played significantly better. I didn't like it at first, but I got really attached to it once I started playing it and really getting to experience the depth that it had as a basketball game in comparison to what was available at the time. And it was kind of the same deal. This was my first year of high school. All my friends went to a different high school than I did, so I was kind of out there by myself. And this is where I think my personality really became very introverted around this time. And I used to get home from school and I would just zone out playing these games for literally hours on end. And I started thinking about this as I was thinking about these games. I was so into these games that I used to write down all the statistics for each game. Now, they had season stat tracking as far as like averages and totals for the entire season, but they would not track your points scored in each game and let you look back at them. So I was thinking, back then I used to do a lot of creative writing for school and then for other purposes, just for fun or whatever. And I never threw any of those books away. And in a lot of those books, I used to write down the statistics for each game. So I was thinking to myself, as I was thinking about these games today, I wondered if I still got those books. And I went digging through my garage and some of the bins that I had, and I actually found a lot of them. I'm actually going to show you this just because it's really goofy and silly, but I can't find any for Live 96, but I did have, oh, I take that back, yes I do. So, I'm just going to show these real quick because I think it's kind of interesting. Maybe not to y'all, but to me. But this was for Live 98 as I was going through the season. I don't know how well that's going to show. And I would write down most of the top players and the top 2 players from the other team and just track what the score was for the game, if there was anything interesting that happened during the game. I don't know how well that's showing up, but that's the level of nerd that I was on. And for Live 96 on the PlayStation, this is back before they did like Player of the Year or MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. You'd have to do your own based on the statistics and how you thought the season was going. But I still got the stuff from Live 96 written down. It's hilarious that I still have this stuff. League leaders and all that good stuff on there. I don't know what it says about me that I still have that, but that's the level of nostalgia that I'm on as far as it's concerned. I still have these notebooks all these years later, and the fact that I was so into them that I would actually sit there and, like, for 10 minutes after the game, I would sit there and write down all the statistics and whatnot. And apparently I cared enough never to throw this stuff away, which is hilarious. But yeah, that's NBA Live 96 for me. Now, Live 96 is probably the only game that I played by myself, and I don't feel any nostalgic feelings because of my connection to another person. But a game that I definitely feel nostalgic about because of connection to another person is Super C for the NES. Now, it is arguable that the first one is better than the second one. However, my father bought this game at, I believe it was Sam's Club. It was one of those big box, club membership stores. I'm pretty sure it's Sam's Club. Anyway, he wasn't the type to just kind of go out and buy a game based on the fact that I really wanted it. And he and I played Contra, the original Contra, all the time. I mean, that game, oh my God, the feelings I have for that one. But this one, I remember he bought specifically because I showed interest in it, and I think he was a big Contra fan as well. But normally when we went to the store and we looked at a game and I said that I was really interested in it and I really wanted it, he wouldn't just buy it. But for whatever reason, he bought this one, and I remember playing this that weekend and for many, many, many weekends afterwards. I think it took a while for us to beat this game finally, but we did. We used to play this. Oh man, I don't even know how to talk about it. The feelings that I get right now. But my father was a very volatile person. My older brother, my younger sister, and I think we used to fear him a lot more than anything else. Just because if we ever said the wrong thing to him or said something that he didn't like for whatever reason, it didn't necessarily have to be directed toward anybody. It would just be something that would irritate him and piss him off. Just like that, he would go from like the nicest guy in the world to somebody that you just did not want to be around. Very, very angry and violent for whatever reason. The only time, very rarely, I mean every once in a while, if we played something competitively, he'd get upset because I would beat him. But the only time that he was ever like a father should be, I guess, like really, really nice and just a fun person to be with, was playing video games. So I think in general, that is where my love for video games comes from, because that was the only time I ever felt like I was relaxed around him or could let my guard down around him. But we had some really good times playing Super C, and I remember, some of my favorite memories just in life in general were the weekends that I was spending at his house, where we would play video games till like 3 in the morning and then get up at like 6 and turn on the Nintendo or the Sega Genesis or whatever and just play for 3 or 4 hours before we went out and did whatever. So Super C was definitely one of those games that brings back the warm and fuzzies when I think about those days in my life. And another one that I really enjoyed for the exact same reason is Streets of Rage for the Sega Genesis. And this is one of those games that he didn't know anything about, but I used to read the video game magazines, and I would see the ads where they would show that the game had like 80 something moves, which seems very exaggerated now, and I don't remember the exact number. I remember it being touted as a game that was much more advanced than a lot of the other fighting games at the time, and it was because it had so many more moves. And I remember we bought this on a Sunday at Toys R Us, and this was a few hours before he had to take me back home from the weekend. But I remember being blown away. I know the character sprites were small, but the music was amazing and the gameplay was just fantastic. And this was what, 91, I think? Yeah, 1991. And we had many weekends playing this, and one of the difficult parts was that you can actually hit each other. So there used to be a lot of up and back with that. You know, I get upset because, you know, I'm trying to beat the game or get as far in the game as possible, and he was having fun just, you know, plowing away on everybody, including me. But we finally got to a point where we used to consistently play together and beat it together. And I have really good memories of beating this with my brother as well. My brother was a lot more level-headed as far as playing video games was concerned, where he would actually try to work with me instead of against me. It's definitely a great game, and it's one of those games that I feel like really sums up what the Sega Genesis was all about. You know, it was a great system with great beat-em-ups. It was capable of really amazing music when done right. And this is one of those games, when I think Sega Genesis, I think Streets of Rage. Now, speaking of my brother, my older brother is about a year and a half older than me. So around the time that my father got the Sega Genesis, he was pretty much done with the NES, and he let us take the NES home. Probably not a great idea. Me and my older brother, we used to skip school all the time and play Nintendo games. We didn't really have a whole lot of Nintendo games. He, for whatever reason, he kept a lot of the games in his house, but he gave us the system. Yeah, so we rented a lot of games. And I remember specifically one year that we were in summer school. I want to say it was like 91, maybe 92. But there was a year where both me and my brother had to go to summer school. So, summer school, who does that? we would rent games, and then we would skip summer school and stay home and play games all day. And we did this a lot during the school year too, where we'd leave the house, wait for my mom to leave, and then come back home and play Nintendo all day. Not a great idea. Probably wouldn't do it again if I had the chance to not do that, because, you know, I'd like to say that it benefits a person to go to school more than play video games, but I didn't learn a whole lot in school anyway. I was always thinking about other stuff. But one of the games that we did rent that I absolutely love to this day, that I used to play with my brother, more against him, but it's Super Dodgeball for the NES. I feel like it's one of the greatest games on the NES. I think it's a technically great game for its time. It had great music, the controls were fantastic. It's one of the few games that I feel like was way better than the arcade version. I feel like this version is actually way better than the TurboGrafx 16 version as well. They just, those two versions don't play the same as this does. I think graphically they're better, but this has much better gameplay. And it's a game that, it's easy. Well, it's easy now, but back in the day it was kind of hard to learn, I guess, for me. But we had a lot of great battles on this. He and I would go up and back, and I would sit there and watch him play and try to get through the game, and he would sit there and watch me play, and we kind of pick up our own techniques as far as what works best, and then we would play against each other. And unfortunately for him, I was much better at video games, and I used to beat him consistently, so he didn't want to play it too much after that. But yeah, it's definitely one of those games. When I think about the NES and I think about the early 90s, I definitely think about this game and how much fun I had at the time. So the last game I want to talk about is certainly not to be taken as the least. Street Fighter 2 for the Super Nintendo. Now this is, again, a game, when I think about the Super Nintendo, I think Street Fighter 2. I was such a huge fan of this game in the arcade, and if anybody grew up back in the early 90s, and especially the time that Street Fighter 2 first came out, like 91, 92, it was really hard to get on a machine and play. Back in those days, the etiquette for the arcade was, there's a line, you pop your quarter on the top of the system, or your token or whatever, and you sit back and you wait until your turn comes up. So, being that, you know, I didn't get a chance to practice much and I wasn't good, I was one quarter, sit there and wait for 15-20 minutes, play for like 2 minutes, and I was out, done. This is a game, I think I really cut my chops on this. I went on vacation to, where did we go? I think I went to Ohio. I want to say it was Ohio, with my father, brother, sister, and his girlfriend, which I hated her. But anyway, there was a small arcade in the hotel, which was cool as hell. And one of the games that they had was Street Fighter 2. So me and my brother and my sister would get up really early in the morning and we would go into the lobby with a handful of quarters and just play Street Fighter 2 before, we were supposed to go out and do, whatever people do on vacation, go see stuff, blah, blah, blah. What are you going to see in Ohio anyway, right? Anyway, so that's where I finally got a chance to cut my chops on Street Fighter 2. Back in the summer of, was it 91, 92? Had to be 91. I was basically forced to go to a day camp because I was a really bad kid. I was cutting school all the time, as I already mentioned. I was one of those knuckleheads who wanted to be in the streets all the time, causing trouble and just being a little asshole, to be quite frank. So I was on the brink of failing whatever grade I was in at the time, what, 5th grade? And one of the deals that I had to make, or my mother had to make for me, was to go to this day camp. And I don't remember what the name of the day camp was called, but it was in Niles, Illinois. And my mom, she actually worked out there, so she would drop me and my sister off at the day camp, and then she would go to work and pick us up after work. At some point during the summer, and this was right around the time where I coincidentally decided I was going to stop going, somebody had told me that Street Fighter 2 came out for the Super Nintendo, and I was like, what? This is back before the internet, so we didn't get news like that. That was a huge shock for me. I was like, no, there's no way. After I got home from day camp that day, I went to the local rental store, which I believe was West Coast Video at the time, and believe it or not, they actually had Street Fighter 2 for the Super Nintendo. So I remember begging my mom, just begging her to let me rent the game and the system, because we didn't have the system at the time. So she broke down. I think she broke down a lot as far as video game stuff, is because I would just constantly bug her until she said yes. But she let me rent the game, she let me rent the system. I don't believe I went to summer camp the next couple of days, and very shortly after that I just decided to stop going. But I remember renting it, and me and my brother and my sister would sit there, me and my brother, but we would just sit there and play this for hours. I think not too long after that, I begged my mom, like literally just got on my knees and begged her and said, I asked her for the system in the game, or at least the game, and I don't remember how I came up with the ability to play it on the system. But she broke down, the game was like 75 bucks. I'm talking about early 90s money, man, that was crazy. And she was a single parent, 3 kids. That was really hard to justify, I think. So she finally said yes, and not too long after I got the system, I don't remember how that came about, but she actually bought me the system. So that entire summer, and I think probably for the next summer after that, I played this game all the time. And I got really good at it too. I don't know how interesting this is going to be because I'm just rambling now, but man, again, I think I became much more introverted because I stopped going outside and started playing these games a lot more. This was just a lot more fun to me than running the streets and acting stupid. So I guess there's some positives there, but what can you say about Street Fighter 2? I still feel like it's the greatest game of all time. And the Super Nintendo version was very, very close to the arcade version. Probably not so much now when I compare the two, but as a kid I couldn't tell the difference. Except for, who was it? Dawson stage, missing 2 elephants. But, and what's his name? Honda stage, where he was missing the animations in the tub and all that. But, man, greatest game of all time to me. The music in this game is amazing, even in the Super Nintendo version. I'm only talking about the Super Nintendo version now. I can't really compare it to the arcade, but I'm just talking about the Super Nintendo version. Graphically, it was amazing. The controls were airtight. I felt like it was the perfect game at the time. And it was one of those games that I think I started off playing with Guile, and then I moved to Ken, and Ken is my guy to this day, but I had to play the game with everybody and learn how to play it with every character and beat the game with every character multiple times. And then of course I had to get better at it and play it on the harder difficulty levels to get the different endings and all that stuff. So I remember doing that for a long, long, long time, and again, till this day, it's definitely the greatest game, to me, the greatest game of all time. I don't think there's been another game that has had the same impact in my life. And it's hard to say that there's many more games that have had the same kind of impact in video gaming in general. What are you going to say? Super Mario Brothers, Pong, not a whole lot of other games that had such a massive impact on gaming just overall in general. And I would absolutely love to go back and kind of feel how I felt the first time I played that on the Super Nintendo. So there are my top 6 nostalgic games. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw out an open tag to anybody else who wants to talk about the games that have the most nostalgic feelings to them. On a side note, I didn't do my Friday night pickup video because I wasn't feeling it at the time, so I'll probably just go ahead and do that now since I'm already running my mouth and I'm up and talking and all that. So if you see me in the same clothes, I'm not wearing the same damn clothes. I'm just shooting a video right afterwards. So thank you, Stewfish, Mr. Dude 206, for tagging me and allowing me to share my feelings on the games that I feel most nostalgic about. Talk to you guys later. Peace.